What's up, r/competitive Overwatch? It's TankEngine here with a Korean Contenders seeding tournament primer. Okay, I'm a professional talent scout. I've done recently some work with entities like Talon, and I was also the head coach of Class 6 for the majority of the last 5 months or so. I'm joined by Taureon. Taureon, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tarion. You may know me as r/Cal Karma Whore. I am also a Tier 3 coach, most recently with Class 6, currently looking for new opportunities. The Tank Engine and I have both had ample experience in the North American Tier 3 scene and beyond, and we consider ourselves to be somewhat of experts on the Tier 3 and above scene. So we're here to present to you today a brief summary and primer, if you will, of the Korean Contenders seeding tournament coming up in T minus 7 hours.
Let's get right into it. And it wouldn't be a season of Korean contenders without a really fresh and interesting runaway lineup right off the bat. Look at the names: Flower, Revenge, Mag, Merit. You guys would know a lot of these. A lot of these players were at Gauntlet. FaZe is a player who's been working around in different teams playing in NA. Chio, you might not know him, but he's from Griffin, a sort of tier 2.5 team in Korea. But Chio has a ton of talent. I'm sure you'll see some big plays from him. This is a stacked team through and through. This is a lot of talent that's very close to Owl, but just on the cusp of like being ready. Think about where Flower was last year. Some mechanical brilliant moments, some mechanically not brilliant moments. The consistency not really there. Maybe his level of play is not really there. This describes a lot of players on Runaway. And I think the name of the game for Runaway during this season is going to be leveling up. Look for them in the contenders seeding tournament to perform pretty well. The biggest weak point of this roster, I don't know about what you think, Tarion, but it looks to me, I'm a little suspect about their tank line. FaZe had a good diva back a ways. Mag has had a good performance on all sorts of tanks, but I think maybe when they're going up against some of these higher level tank lines, like Element Mystics, Kellen Wiz tank line, or someone who y'all, maybe they're gonna have some issues. What do you think?
I definitely think the tank line has some cause for concern, especially since FaZe hasn't competed on stage or in online events in several months. Since disappearing from Skyfoxes, I haven't seen him in any major tournaments. And Mag's absence from the Overwatch League could be teams not wanting to take a risk on a player that'll only be eligible halfway through the season, but it could be indicative of some deeper problem with his playstyle or team mentality.
Yeah,
But for
100%. Or as Orisa even, like you don't know like what's happened in trials, right? Especially seeing both Maga and QOQ left out of Owl, QOQ even left off this team. Definitely something to worry about. Also, if you
the
guys don't know, Assassin, Tarion, correct me if I'm wrong, he is a hit scan primary player. So you're going to see Assassin plus Merit. Merit has a ton of flexibility. Think about a player like Decay, Godspeed, Sparkle. He can play a wide range of things. Flower, y'all know him.
that's one of the things I'm going to be looking forward to most about this Runaway roster, because in the past, when they've had multiple DPS players on the lineup, they have designated two as starters, but kept one on the bench for development. We saw this with Decal in seasons past, with Assassin last season even. But now that we have three DPS players returning to the roster this time, which ones will see the most playtime? Will we see a true rotation, or will one ride the bench for the majority of the season? There's no way to tell.
Yeah, certainly. And seeing Revenge, a player who didn't really ever show up on the Overwatch League main stage, he was touted as this big mechanical talent, certainly showed it during 2018's Korean Contenders. Maybe this will be a shot, to come out and really perform. I think this is a super interesting team, Tarion. But we'll have to see. Definitely one of the top teams coming out of this. I don't know what you think, but within my power rankings, they're probably around number three.
I would keep them. The only thing preventing me from putting them in the number one spot based on raw mechanical talent alone is their lack of designated coaches at the moment. Because as we saw
Oh, yeah,
just
that's a great
recently,
point.
Coach Noru has just recently been poached from Gen.G, and there are no announced coaches still with Runaway.
And I mean, this
This
has been
could
an
mean
issue
an
with Runaway for like quite a few seasons, right? Like Naru came in late in last roster building cycle. I mean, Yang Wan was never like didn't start out officially as a coach, right? So maybe that'll come to bite them this season.
I'd just like to see a return of Runaway to some a more or Runner himself to a more official administrative position within the team, and if he could transition to coaching effectively and still run the business, then I'm all for it.
100%. And with that, we'll move on to Element Mystic. This is a super cool roster, and I think by far the best roster on paper coming into this season. Going down the list, Choi Se-won used to play second fiddle to Decay and Youngjin back on the original Kong-Do roster from 2018. Recently playing on Griffin, was by far the standout player. Comes into this roster as a projectile specialist with a ton of mechanical talent. And he's going to have a challenge spot on this roster. Heesang, an incredible young talent, specializing in projectile, had an amazing performance at Next on Doomfist. Just one of the hottest hit scan talents in the entire region, if not the single hottest. Probably one of the top 3 most underrated players outside of Owl, if not one of the top 3 best players outside of Owl. This guy is insane. This DPS line is going to be a force to be reckoned with. I guarantee you, you guys are going to see the pundits go after this roster as unproven. Do not listen to them. Choi Se-won, and just consult the tape. Watch the VODs for yourself. Make your own judgment. These players are elite. Coming down to the tank line, Alpha is going to be contested by a young gun for the second season in a row in the form of Kellen. This is going to be a super interesting dynamic. Will Alpha's veterancy be able to keep the edge over Kellen? Maybe in an Orisa meta Taureon. I think that Alpha has a shot at keeping his spot, but what if we go into dive? I've heard Kellen's Winston is a force to be reckoned with, and I've seen it with my own eyes when EM Academy played in Korea Cup. This is going to be super cool.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think this roster stands as a testament to 2 things. Firstly, is the absolute strength and power of the Korean Tier 3 infrastructure. We have players coming in from Element Mystic's Academy system, which was up till recently headed by current Spitfire coach SNT, or Awesome Guy. Players that they pulled as substitute stand-in players for the next LAN tournament, and still managed to completely wipe the floor with the old guard Runaway roster. Like these players, they may be unproven talent to the eyes of the masses, but this storied org is willing to take a chance on them, and I think that speaks for a lot. But also, we see players like Alpha, Unique, and MCD that should be at the top of everybody's scouting list for the 2020 season, and yet remain outside of Overwatch League.
100%. The situation of Unique and MCD is incredibly strange. MCD is a player who used to have very bad game sense back in his time on Foxes, but really came into his own under Rush and Yong's direction in the last cycle of contenders with Element Mystic, and came out looking like, I would argue, the top flex support prospect going into the 2020 OWL season. Unique, same thing. A player with a ton of raw potential, carved into this really, really high tier main support by Rush and Yong. Kind of left out of contenders. Also, Wiz had a great performance at Next on Sigma, standing in for the already picked up Hanbin. He's going to be a super dynamic player, and I can't wait to see his ball possibly in action in Dive. Look at the coaching staff. Yes Man, you guys might not remember him, especially if you're newer to the scene. This is a guy who coached Tier 2 Korea back in the Apex days under KNC VMAX. Actually had some very good results and developed some really good talent with that roster. I'm kind of excited to see him back.
From KNC, right? Am I right?
Yeah, Yes Man came from KNC.
But Izayaki as well. Like,
oh, yes, Izayaki came from him. I think multiple Foxes players actually came from KNC. Possibly, yeah, I know Izayaki did. I mean, certainly.
The one hesitancy I have with Yes Man, even his record in 2017 era Tier 2 notwithstanding, is that this, as far as I'm aware, he hasn't been active in the coaching scene since at least early 2018.
At least not active at a high level or in a high level role, yeah.
And then, alongside him in the coaching staff, we have Coach 815, who is without a doubt a veteran in esports, but his track record with London last year was less than stellar, shall we say.
Yeah, and if you look at some of the in-locker room footage from Coach 815, it looked like he had a lot of the coaching fundamentals down at a very high level. You do worry, though, Taureon, about the actual game knowledge capacity that this coaching staff has. As you said, Yes Man hasn't been in the game at a super high level for a while. Coach 815 obviously had some pretty big bungles with London at the start of last season, getting fired mid-season. So you have to question if they have the integrity at coaching staff to produce great results this season. But if there's one thing we know about the LM Mystic management, is that they seem to put together a great roster season in and season out. So I have a lot of faith in this team. They're my number one in the power rankings.
Absolutely. And then moving on to Gen.G, we have a roster that produced some very talented pieces moving up to Overwatch League. We had Glister and Creative moving their separate ways, but there were some notable talents that were excluded from that. We have Weki, known for his performance on Season 1 Seoul Dynasty, has been an underrated gem in Korean Tier 2 ever since, but underlooked for no apparent reason. Oberon as well, veteran talent, proven himself on multiple different teams since Apex Season 1, overlooked for Overwatch League. We have Huyal, Overwatch League proven with Spitfire in Season 1, has proven himself in Tier 2 NA and Korea, overlooked.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting storyline here with Gen.G. You've got these few veterans on the team in the form of, as you mentioned, Wuya, Wakid, Oberon, but then mixed in, you've got some of the youngest players in all of Korean Tier 2 right now in Stalker, Haim, Someone, Bliss, and B9. Stalker had great performances throughout last year on a wide variety of DPS heroes. Certainly a talent they seem to have developed well. Heim comes in as sort of a Sparkle or Nice style prospect from the Gen.G Academy system with a lot of heroes under his belt, lots of star power. Look for him to have a starting spot, maybe even early in this season from the start. I think he could certainly make Wakid have to cede his spot to him. Stalker Heim could be one of those really elite DPS duos we've come to know in the Korean region for. Someone has had so much success in the Korean ladder, and I think has the mechanics to really challenge Oberon's spot. However, this guy's very young. Taureon, he's 14, right?
15. He's just slightly older than Blitz.
In Bliss, that's another really interesting prospect. One of easily the best main support prospects outside of Owl, bar none. He's very young. Was the youngest player in Korean Contenders last season, as far as I understand.
I believe he still is.
Tons of mechanical talent on him, and then he's being joined by Sanguinar's support duo partner B9, who used to go by RNE, who also played in the Gen.G Academy system with Someone in Heim. Very mechanically talented. This backline has a ton of firepower. Going to be very scary for a team like O2 Blast, who we'll get to in just a bit, who doesn't have as much backline firepower as this team. What are they going to look like in a Zen Bap situation? Or in any situation where you're going to need a Zen or an Ana, some of these high firepower, high mechanical intensity supports.
In
And
this roster, it shows that Gen.G is absolutely willing to invest in Korean Tier 3, even more so than Element Mystic, perhaps. Like their I believe, 4 academy teams have managed to export talent not only within Korea and the Pacific region, but also to OWL in the case of Sanguinar, and I believe there was another, was there not?
There was Although from
Yes,
Gen,
that's right.
Gen S going to straight to Owl on London. And just look at this coaching staff. Zelgadis proved last season that he can take talent people might not consider top tier and make something really formidable out of it. And then Noru, same thing. Did a lot of good developmental work with Runaway throughout the last contender cycle. Overall, this is a very solid team. Some worries for me about the integrity of Wooyall at off tank, and a few questions remain with the DPS line, exactly where the specializations are going to be and how they're going to rotate it. But overall, a very strong team, especially if Wooyall has his career peak right now.
And this stands as an almost direct opposition to O2 Blast's thesis in roster building. They have gone for almost exclusively proven talent in every single role. Proper and Pelican, the classic DPS duo from the WGS armament days, coming back again to prove their skills in a 2-2-2 meta. We have Kalios making his grand return to Korea after a disappointing Overwatch League showing. He's bounced around some Tier 2 and Tier 3 teams since then, but this is his highest profile showing in quite a while. We have Yakpeng, formerly with Toronto Defiant, has been spoken of as a very valuable player behind the scenes, but hasn't managed to show that on stage, even after O2 Ardian's victory or near victory in Contenders 2018. We have Kaiser still with the roster, perhaps in some sort of limbo before he's announced to an Overwatch team. Hard to tell at this point, but This is absolutely a veteran player that can't be overlooked. We have Neko, also Overwatch League veteran talent, strong mechanics, perhaps some behind the scenes locker room issues, but if he's playing again in the Korean infrastructure, it's Korea still has some faith in him. I see no reason to
Yeah.
doubt him at this point.
And then Finn, I think Finn is almost the most exciting player on this roster outside of Pelican. He's going to bring a lot of firepower to like this main support, flex support, limbo role. He's actually known for his Zenyatta and his Ana. He's not typically playing main support, but he does have a very strong main support flex. So O2 Boss has made a tactical decision here, maybe seeing a double flex support traditional hero meta, like a Zen Bat meta, coming up. He decided to bring these two players in. But Taureon, this roster is a humongous disappointment in almost every sense of the word. Going from last contender cycle, where O2 Boss brought in players like Arrow, Proper, Pelican, brought in the WGS armament support line when the rest of the team went to Owl, put together with Krong from Pack, right? Put together an elite roster that competed with the best. Maybe didn't get to Gauntlet at the end of the day, but was competitive at every step of the way. Now to this, with players who have arguably ceilinged, who many people are going to have doubts if they've are even capable of winning a championship in Owl. This is just not an exciting roster, and it's a shame that Budayuk, who the innovator, one of Korea's biggest innovators, the guy who made Dive Goats, he's coaching on this roster. Pelican and Finn, again, really great young talents. It's a shame to see them on this roster with so much what I would consider to be ceilinged talent. Maybe if these talents had been distributed throughout Korean Tier 2, it would have been better, but I see this team as one of the absolute weakest going into the seeding tournament. Proper is a very talented player for sure, but he has consistency issues. And one thing you cannot have when you have such a consistently bad tank line as Kalios and Yakpung will probably be inconsistent. They need their DPS line to carry this team. Pelican will put up a good performance. He has never performed badly on his time in WGS or on O2 Blast. And Finn is not shown to be inconsistent on his time on MVP. But I don't have high hopes for this roster. I'm very disappointed.
I think if we're looking at carries for O2 Blast, I think the strongest carry on this team might well be Butiuk, because he's had experience playing at the top level before, and also with strategic development, as you mentioned, Dive Goats, and he's also a proven player development. This Butiuk discovered Fitz back on
That's right.
GC Basan Lucia, and sent him straight to Overwatch League, and worked with CC, WGS Armament. This coach has experience with taking young players and helping them reach their peak. There are no young players on this roster, but if he's going to, with the exception of Finn, of course, there are no young players on this roster, but if there's anybody that's going to help...
Well, Proper and Pelican are relatively young. Proper is still ineligible for Owl, and Pelican's around 18, I think.
Still experienced, but...
Yeah, they are not. They're veterans, right? Well, at this point, they're veterans, having played like over a cycle, in the big leagues.
Right. I think O2 Boss has put together the staff to help this roster reach their peak, even if at the end of the day they aren't going to have a full trophy base.
Yep, and we'll see. I mean, I could be pleasantly surprised. Like last year, Wu Y'all, many people wrote him off. Many people wrote off Tizzy, but at the end of the day, they came back and showed that they can compete at a very high level again. But a roster that has continuously shown that they can compete at a high level, GC Busan Wave. Talking about this roster, it's very interesting. The DPS line is a shocker. They did not pick up an Edison replacement. Instead, they're running with two traditionally projectile players in Alpha Yi and Delight. I do not know how they plan to win games with this DPS duo, but the coach, Becca, known for his time on White Whale Incheon, is incredibly talented in my opinion. One of the best coaches in Korean Tier 3, should bring a lot of strategic development to this team, should bring a lot of player development to this team. You've got a main tank like Jangu, who's sort of showing shades of Bumper, looks a lot like what Bumper used to look like back when he was developing. So even though they're going to have a lot of questions surrounding who's going to be the Hanzo to pop off within this DPS line, or who's even going to play Widow or Kree, I think there's definitely potential here, Taureon.
I think your likening of Jongu to Bumper is very accurate because on earlier iterations of the GCB Wave roster, he was a flex DPS alongside Alpha E and Delight, and came in to take over the Orisa role from Ion, who had underperformed towards the end of 2018 and early 2019. I think a lot of people are going to present the argument that GCB Wave is going to be one of the stronger teams in Korea, looking purely at the experience this roster has as a core. Like Ritz, Jonggu, Sven, Alfie, Delight, Daydream, and Fielder. That group of players has been competing in Korean contenders since 2018, largely unchanged and unaffected by other happenings in the region. Whether or not this means that their synergy will carry them to a podium finish, or it means that this talent, quite frankly, has seen better days, it's hard to tell.
For sure. I really like the choice to bring in Sven to sort of counterbalance Ritz. They tried this last season with Free as like a hedge against Ritz in case Ritz ceilinged off. Unfortunately, Free was embroiled in scandal quite early in that season, so that sort of cut that off as an option for them. But many people might be familiar with Sven. Time on WGS Armament has already seen a lot of time in Korean Tier 2. Definitely has potential to be a top tier off tank.
It's
Tons of mechanical talent.
also worth mentioning he was the off tank alongside JMac for LGE Huya Chengdu
That's
once again.
right, yeah.
So the tank line in particular, Ritz and Sven, their two options on off tank. I believe they might be the outstanding players on this roster in terms of especially overlooked Korean talent.
Yeah, and what better time in a meta where Wrecking Ball and Sigma and even Winston on the off tank slot are all these in meta heroes. Tons of mechanical skill involved on all of them. What better time to have these high impact off tanks in the game? Although I would be curious what you think about Daydream and Fielder in a more flex support centered meta Tarion.
Like Fielder is an interesting case because in a world where Korea brings out top tier flex support after top tier flex support day in day out, sends every single one of them to Owl. He's been a mainstay in Korea, and his
Fielder,
gameplay
yeah.
doesn't seem to have evolved since 2018.
Truly. I mean, he's been consistent, but can't say too much more than that, unfortunately.
Like I
Daydream,
think,
I think, is suited to this meta because he is historically better at active main supports, and Bap is certainly active.
yeah, certainly his Lucio was absolutely a playmaking style of Lucio that we've seen also from players like Unique and Lee Jae-gon.
But overall, I think this roster might be mid of the pack. They definitely are better on paper, in my opinion, than O2 Blast, especially considering, as Taran was mentioning, the all-star off tanks they have. But Becca, I think, will be the deciding factor on performance here. Does he take these players to a new level? Does he make this DPS line work? We'll have to see, and the only one who has the answer to that is going to be him.
Yeah, absolutely. And then looking at the only other announced roster as of recording for this tournament, we have Meta Athena returning once again with a mixture of old and new talent.
This one's super exciting, I think. They showed some moments of brilliance back with before Rollock, the only footage we have of players like Half and Iniok and even Jasper. But this is ripe with mechanical talent. You've got a player like Tamper, who has very high SR, tons of mechanical skill, had a lot of time in Korean Tier 3. Certainly a great choice to fill the flex DPS role on Meta Athena, which wasn't a role last contender cycle they had a lot of issues with. Terror really wasn't ever the answer for them at that spot. It seemed like they were having issues there. But Inyak, tons of mechanical talent. It'll be great to see him back on Winston again, back on Wrecking Ball, these dive heroes where Inyak specifically excels. Very mechanically talented player. Jasper has an amazing diva. I've heard he has a great Sigma. There's no official footage of that. I can't say based on scrim footage I've seen. But Named also. Named is an absolute playmaker. One of the biggest stars on Lucio during Goats meta. And Half, a very, very promising mechanical talent on flex support. I think this roster has a lot of potential. Although Poise is a red flag for me, though, Tarion.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even on from Kungdu Uncia all the way through NRG through 2018, his hero pool has never shown much other than Widowmaker and maybe a couple other hit scan picks here and there. But for a player that's been out of the scene for that long, you're going to need a much wider hero pool and a much stronger display of talent to remain relevant in Korea.
The coaching staff here is a little interesting. Always Uv has, of course, been working for quite a while with this roster of Meta Athena. No like standout coaching or strategical performance from him as of yet, but Zune, also known as Modern, has been added, and Fickle is still on this roster as well. So I think this coaching staff has a good amount of experience, certainly. They should have no trouble getting the jitters out of these sort of younger players. Whether they'll have the tactical expertise to take this team to a gauntlet run, that remains to be seen.
I think Zune in particular is a very interesting case because under the name Modern, he was a veteran Korean main tank, played on several teams even outside his region. He had a stint in Australia recently with Blank and Warriors. Um, it's my thesis at this point that weaker players who generally end up on good teams always have something more to show behind the scenes. And moving to coaching role is a very natural progression for players like this. Like I think Zune is going to be able to display his game knowledge to this younger group of players and help guide them with his expertise, even if he's not actively leading the front line like he used to be.
Certainly, and moving on to some of the mysteries of Korean contenders. Even hours before the seeding tournament, we do not have a solid idea of what World Game Star or T1 are going to look like. World Game Star have announced that Yang, who was one of the supports on the Gen.G Academy system, main support specifically, is on the roster. He's a very promising talent. It's good to see that WGS acted early and locked him up. Yangjun was one of the first signings out of Tier 3 this season. What we have here on screen is the roster from WGS from last season. I am going to go out on a limb and say at least Ace is still on the team. Ace is an incredible player, one of the absolute best DPS flexes in the entire world outside of Owl, up there with Just in terms of extreme mechanical talent and extreme potential. He was actually Just's partner in DPS on White Whale and Fox's back a contender cycle or two ago. Incredible player. They have Valentine and Agnes as their other DPSs who have shown to have some hit scan talent. Lots of raw potential there. Their game sense is a bit questionable. Gaboshi and SYC, both traditionally pack Korean players, both off tanks as well. Both have shown to have a good amount of mechanical skill on off tanks. We haven't seen them peak though. Anokus has been an absolute dumpster fire on main tank every time he has shown up in Korean contenders. I heartily hope they have replaced him. Noah, okay talent, known for his time on the Going Water S, and then Oporochi, a veteran from Fox's. Definitely one of the more talented main supports, but it looks like he has been at least challenged in his roster spot. Taureon, what do you think of WGS?
I think like this roster has shown in the past with the WGS Armament roster that they are a very good source of young up and coming talent. They may not achieve success as a full roster, but you can expect to see whatever players that they settle on for this tournament. You can expect to see them go further within the Korean Tier 2 infrastructure.
Yeah, and
But
people like to meme about like this org being like so terrible, but I mean, some of the first pickups out of Korea last year came from this WGS org. A lot of the players from the original WGS team. Let me read them off to you. Bernard, remember that name? He's in Owl now. You had a player like Order, who, even though he never made it to Owl, was one of the biggest prospects in Korea as soon as he got done with his stint on WGS. You had players like Hyanyu, who, even though never made it in Owl, were Owl-ready prospects when a lot of main supports in Korea weren't. So WGS is not an org to be slept on. Their head coach, Mighty99, is definitely someone to be doubted in terms of tactical knowledge and coaching ability, but he does seem to be able to make some good scouting decisions, and Ace was certainly one of them. But moving on to Tier 1, Taureon, we can't share yet what we know about Tier 1, but it's a roster dumpster fire.
yeah,
This is not going to be
this is
good.
going to be ooh. Like for Fusion University's experience in Korean contenders. They clearly struggled with bringing a mixed roster fully ready to compete with the best of the best in Tier 1 or Tier 2 Korea. We saw players like Elk and Snello and Beast Halo even slowly get relegated to the bench as they struggled to bring in talent that could compete with the best of the best. And now rumors are swirling around the tier 2 and tier 3 scenes that tier 1 will in fact be going to a mixed roster for this tournament, bringing in some unknown and unproven talent from NA and perhaps other regions as well.
Unproven to say the least, Tarion. Expect these guys to be perma-stuck in trials. Even if WGS, who has been historically one of the less affluent organizations in Korea, has Ace and Yangjeon on their team, I am not bullish on T1's prospects. With Fusion University's pedigree, Tarion, you would have thought they would have put together a better showing in Korean Contenders, but just the last Contenders cycle, not making Gauntlet, and then into this cycle, which looks to be a disaster in the making. What's going wrong?
It wouldn't be surprised if they saw negative press from teams like Paris and perhaps others that escape me at the moment. Teams relegating Western players and moving towards majority Korean rosters. Like they may have wanted to avoid that with the successor to Fusion University by introducing a mixed roster. But you can't have better PR than winning. And if you're not building a roster with a victory in mind, then I question what you're doing in tier 2 in the first place.
100%. We've got one last bonus meme for you guys in a quick review of the Talon roster. We have confirmed that Think is not the Think that played on LW Red at Main Tank back in the Apex days. He is in fact a new player who has played in Korea Cup with the Cheongju Hunters. Intentional pun on the name of Chengdu Hunters. They're a tier 3 pug team that plays in Korea Cup and gets okay results pretty frequently. They've done well actually the last 4 months in the Korean tier 3 scene. You got Piggy, known for his time, I believe, on Lingan for briefly, right, Tarion?
This was like right after the LG Huya transition, so he was
Correct.
technically an academy player before getting replaced by Sven.
Obviously, middling talent. We'll see what happens here with Think. Obviously, the tank line of Think and Piggy looks to be a bit of a cause for concern. Dotori and Swoon, the very good support duo from Blossom. Blossom, of course, known for having issues at Main Tank, particularly during their tenure. But Dotori and Swoon have always shown moments of brilliance and are relatively consistent. So I think they're a great addition to this roster. And then Arrow and Decal. This is actually a reformation of the duo from Tarion. Was this O2 Blast ran this at some point in the last Contenders cycle, Arrow Decal? I think this is a super talented pairing. Both players who have been underserved, in my opinion, in Korean Contenders, getting a shot here.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if you're going to look at underrated star power on this roster, or in Pacific in general, Talon Esports is the place to look. Like, we've seen their success in sending half of their roster to Eternal Academy just the other day. And now we have a full Korean roster returning once again to compete in the Pacific region with stars like Arrow and Decal, and Dotori and Swoon, even some underrated talent in Think and Piggy. Like, these players are going to be names to watch, both in Pacific and in seasons of other Contenders regions to come.
Well, guys, thank you for joining us. This was the TankEngine and Taureon Korean Contenders Seeding Tournament Primer. We'll be coming back at you later this week with some recaps of the Korean Contenders Seeding Tournament action, giving you the freshest storylines from the region. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. I'm at Green Tank Engine. Taureon is at Taureon_OW. The tags are on screen. We will be seeing you soon. Make sure to subscribe and like this video if you like this content. Please upvote us on Reddit. Taureon, any last words?
I'm still LFT, guys.
See you guys in just a bit.